everyone. Thanks for being here. We are so excited about our premiere episode of Singles, Convos, and Community. And more importantly, we're excited to have our amazing guest, Andre Patterson from 100 Black Men of Austin. We are going to have a great conversation here. Andre and I have met before, but I'm so grateful to Andre, and I just expressed that to him off camera. I'm so grateful that he has agreed to do this, and it was kind of impromptu on a side note because we were already planning on meeting and having conversation, but he agreed to bring our audience, our community as a part of this. So we're really excited about that in honor of Father's Day. This is we call it Father's Day month around here, Andre, because
I
we
love it.
celebrate Mother's Day month and we celebrate Father's Day month because you can never have enough days to celebrate parents, right? And the
Yeah.
amazing things that they do. So we are so excited to be here. Singles, Combos, and Communities is a space that we dive into topics that are really matter most for single parents that are very close to the heart. But we really want to address the pain points that impact our single parents' lives. And so, as we know, the topic that we're going to be talking about today, which is fathers, all things dads, in mentorship. But before we do that, I want to again welcome our guest, um, Andre Patterson. And Andre, thanks again for
Yes.
being here. Can you start by just sharing a little bit about what 100 Black Men of Austin is, and then, of course, 100 Black Men nationwide as a
Yeah.
whole? So, our audience, I know a little bit, but it's always nice to hear about it. And of course, our audience would love to know more about it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Kim. First and foremost, I really do want to extend my thanks to you for giving me the opportunity to kind of have this conversation with you. Believe it or not, these types of conversations we have within my organization all the time. So I can't wait to delve further into that discussion. But to kick everything off, the 100 Black Men of America got started. The idea of it got started in the 60s, and coming out of New York, and then really the whole focus with that organization was around um, providing mentorship to young folks within the community. That's kind of what was really driving those men at that time. It officially got spun up in 1985, and you have different offshoots, or you have a network of chapters throughout the nation that are all affiliated with the national brand, where we all are have five pillars that we adhere to. Primarily around mentorship, right? So leadership, health and wellness, economic development, and these pillars basically are, aspects that are used to
Mm.
facilitate how we're going to engage with the community. Now, the Austin chapter got started officially in 1995. So this year we made 30 years. So we are
Yay!
now a 30-year
Woohoo! That's
organization. Yeah,
awesome.
thank you. We're excited about that. We made it.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So it was actually a spinoff, or actually inspired by the men that left Austin and went to the Million Man March in Washington, D.C., got exposed to the 100 Black Men of America, came back and established and chartered this organization. So that's kind of its core and its origin story here in Austin. Now it's gone through different iterations as to how we have operated within this city. I'm uh, I've recently stepped into this president position as of January. Prior to
Mm.
that, Carl Spencer was our president for the past 7 years, and he is one of the main reasons why I made that decision to join this organization. But that's kind of the origin story of the 100 Black Men of Austin.
That is phenomenal. You are doing amazing work. We, first of all, commend you for stepping into this leadership role
Yeah.
and carrying, then passing the torch to you and you carrying it on and doing such a phenomenal job. And so, thank you first and foremost for sharing that. We're going to
Sure.
learn more about 100 Black Men of Austin as well as 100 Black Men of America as we continue on. But before we do that, again, in honor of Father's Day month, talk about what is going on with fathers what's going on with mentorship in this new year. I'm saying new year.
Yeah.
We're halfway through it, so I guess it's not new year anymore. We're in June
Wow.
now.
Wow.
Christmas is around the corner. Okay, so
Wow.
let me catch
Right?
myself on that. We're halfway
Man.
into this year, but 2025 is still it's still going, and it's still
Right.
we're in the thick of it. What does mentorship really look like in 2025 to you? Like, what does it look
Yeah.
a little different than it has in the years past? What does it look like to you?
Well, that's interesting you say that because and this may go into some of the reasons why I even decided to go down this path. But one of the core motto of the 100 Black Men is what they see is what they'll be. And that
Hmm.
that drew me, right? Because that's both in the positive and negative. And so, and that aspect is something that we have to remember when, the whole adage of you hear old folks bringing up the fact that all these young people don't know what's going on these days, or they acting wild, and they have all these notions of how these young folks are acting up, right? Forgetting
Right.
how they used to act up when we were young, right? But my constant response to that is, well, first of all, these kids did not pop up out the ground.
No.
Somebody raised them,
Yeah.
right? So if that is how they're operating, then that could also be a reflection of some of the challenges and
Yeah.
aspects within our community.
Yeah.
Anyone that knows me, they always know I always have a book. When I'm talking to them, I always have a book that I recommend of some sort.
Okay.
And one of the books that I read a couple years ago that really stuck with me is called Brainwashed: Challenging the Myth of Black Inferiority. It was written by
Mm.
Tom Burrell. And what was really fascinating about that book was each chapter kind of, addresses key aspects within our community, things that are culturally considered, air quotes, black,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
Well, some of them, when you hold that mirror up, could be damning in some ways. And so when you look at it from a mentorship perspective, I think our core job as adults, as we are maturing, is to intentionally pour into the folks that are coming up behind us to build legacies. And I
Yeah.
think in 2025, and this may not necessarily be unique to the Black community, but I would say since today we're you know primarily talking about the Black community, I
Mhm.
would say that there are many adults that are choosing not to be um, mentors, right? They're choosing not to
Mm.
be elders. And so we're taking these paths of not intentionally pouring into the young ones. And at the same time, the young ones, I have felt kind of abandoned in some ways when you talk to them.
Mhm.
It was a study that I read that basically called out the fact that although we are more connected digitally than ever before, there's so many folks that feel still alone. They feel lonely, and that is double so for the young people. When we've talked to some of these young folks and some of the initiatives and programs that we have going on, and you get past the bravado, you get past the defense mechanisms, and you really hear what they're saying, that is a consistent theme. And the theme is that they feel misunderstood, not catered to times, and not listened to. And so those
Wow.
are things that really stood out to me in 2025.
Hmm. That's deep. And those are things that we don't necessarily hear about often, or the spotlight
Yeah,
isn't on that. And so it's really, it's awesome that you have brought that to the forefront and that you've honed in on it because obviously you're in a leadership role. You have an amazing team of support around you that are trying to meet the needs, bridge the gap
yeah,
there, right?
yeah, yeah.
And that leads me, that's a perfect segue to the next question, which is addressing the elephant in the room, I guess, for a lack of better words. How does fatherhood show up in the stories or needs of men and boys, the boys that you serve?
Ooh. In so many ways, man, I'll tell you, even I fall guilty of this, right? So you sometimes get sucked into the narrative that black men don't show up for their kids.
Mhm.
What's actually is not true.
Right.
It's not true at all. Like, even from a statistics perspective,
Right.
black men are very engaged with their children,
Yeah, they
right?
are. Mhm.
Now, in some cases, they may not necessarily be with the mother, right? They may not be in that relationship, but that doesn't mean that they're not in that child's life. But I'll tell you this: there's a lot of pressure that's put on black men, black people as a whole, but black men uniquely in some ways. One of the things that I would say from a cultural perspective in this society is that we're not given a lot of leeway to express ourselves in a myriad of ways, right? So we're relegated oftentimes to presenting ourselves a certain way, and that expresses itself or takes it all the way up to fatherhood. What does it mean to be a good father?
Right.
And some of the things that I've experienced being in this organization is the fact that once you create that safe space where black men can talk amongst themselves freely and openly,
Mhm.
man, it is absolutely an amazing thing to see.
Right.
I can't tell you how many times I was told, black men joining my organization saying things like, "Man, I joined this organization originally thinking that I had all these things to offer to the community. I
Mhm.
wanted to give back, but I had no idea how much I needed it myself." Right? And
Mhm.
so that being said, what these black men are finding is they're finding that they're not alone, and
Mhm.
some of their thoughts and some of their feelings aren't unique. As soon as you start finding that camaraderie and finding that that community of other men that are there for you and really understanding what you're going through, I think it's an eye opener for so many of us. But the undercurrent is that these black men care. That it's awesome. I'll give you one story that floored me. So I was at a leadership conference for the 100 Black Men last year,
Mhm.
and one of the things that was brought up. So this is all the presidents from all the different chapters around the nation, you know, um, in one room, and this particular topic we're talking about, uh, how to run some of our initiatives when it comes to the mentorship programs and so on and so forth. Now, on average, a lot of these men, I would say, probably above the age of 55. So I was by far, by a lot, way younger than that. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So I was an anomaly, But but those men, and the reason why I state the age is because the topic that came up
Mm.
was related to LGBTQ, right? So
Wow.
some of the challenges were, hey, how do we handle folks, kids that are coming to the program? Remember, a lot of the Saturday Leadership Academy programs are geared towards young men or young
Yeah.
males, and you have some kids that are coming in that want to transition or are curious or confused or take your
Mm.
pick of adjective. Now, pause on that. If you bet me money, if I would have lost every dime on my bet. My bet was when that man brought that topic up, I sat there and said, "Oh Lord, here we go. It's about to be on and popping. We're gonna have all these older black men in this room, right? Talking about, coming from their perspective as to how we should and shouldn't be, and this, that, and the other." That was quite the contrary. The meeting was scheduled for an
Mm.
hour. We went for 2 hours, and the level of empathy in that room was
Wow.
phenomenal. It was just the discussion. Some of the men were saying things like, "You know what? I have to admit the fact that this is beyond my experience, but I want to know, how do I handle this? How do I address this? What's the best
Mm.
way? What's the best approach?" And that was, again, going to what the narrative is, right?
Yeah.
If you just looked at us on social media, you would think one thing, but in reality, now we do, you have to take into consideration that these groups of men were specific to being leaders of mentorship focused
Hmm.
organizations. So I do get that. I do understand
Okay.
that.
They had a little more of an
But
advantage,
even within
right?
that,
Okay.
absolutely. But even within that context, the level of empathy in that room, the level of willingness to understand willingness to
Mhm.
have the conversation in a reasonable way, right? Not to say that
Mm.
anyone was there to quote unquote convert people or anything like that, but
Right.
no, it was
Right.
a legitimate conversation. And so that was an example of men,
Mm.
right, wanting to pour into their community, wanting to take care of the young ones in their community. And I think that was an example of how fathers have been truly in the community. Now, we may not necessarily all know how to go about doing that. I would venture to say that we can definitely challenge some of the ways that we were raised
Mm.
weren't the healthiest. I'm just
Mm.
gonna be honest, and we can have a debate and discussion on that separate. But
Right.
what we consider quote unquote being black and being associated
Yeah.
with being black. I'll give you a prime example. One of them is the idea of spanking, right? For
Corporal
some reason we
punishment.
say that,
Right.
yeah, corporal punishment, right? We say that's a
Mhm.
black thing, and then first of all, it's not. It's not unique to us.
It's not.
Second of all,
No.
right, and we can debate and discuss on its place or should it even occur. But the fact of the matter is, we have a lot of men now that are willing to have that conversation, to really
That's
discuss
great.
and say, what do we care about? What are we trying to do? And that to me, I think is a huge beacon of hope from my
Yes.
perspective.
That's phenomenal. I got to We just have to ponder on that for a second.
Yeah.
There was a lot to unpack with that, but that's just amazing. The empathy part that you spotlighted, that so often I'm kind of getting the sense that men can be underestimated, and
Oh yeah.
especially when it comes to emotional quote unquote intelligence and so forth. So to hear there was empathy in that room, there was understanding in that room, there was openness in that room. That speaks volumes. That you can't we can't go forth in stereotyping any of that. That day is done. It shouldn't have existed to begin with, right? But especially when it comes to these important topics. So thank you for
I
drawing.
do want to mention one thing on
Yes,
that, and you're
absolutely.
nailing it. I think I know this is probably cliche and this has come up so many times. Social media has been
Mm,
such a detriment to our
wow.
community in many ways. There are positive aspects. Let's put
Yeah.
those to the side, but detrimental from the perspective of perception, right?
Mm,
So I'll give you another story. One of our initiatives is called Saturday Leadership Academy. In the Saturday Leadership Academy, the whole focus is around providing a program on maturing young men, teaching them how to
mm,
become men and
yeah.
anywhere from tying a tie to financial literacy, this, that, and the other, right?
Yeah.
Well, when we kicked off the SLA program this past year, we sit down the parents, right? Or usually it's the moms. It's either the moms
Mhm.
or the grandmoms, right?
Right.
Where
Right.
we sit them down and we're basically framing out what the expectations are. This is what we're going to be going over, during the next couple of weeks. This is what the SLA is all about. I'll tell you, one of the women that was in there, you could tell, you could feel it. You could feel the heat coming off of her in the beginning, right? Where she's coming in, she's brought her son. Her son was
Wow.
16, right?
Mm,
Homeschooled. I think he was homeschooled for 7 or 8 years or something like that. And you could tell she had a lot of skepticism just based off of her posture. I would
right.
say probably a good 30 to 45 minutes in the middle of our presentation, she raised her hand and she said, I have to stop you. And I said, okay. And so she basically stated that based off of how we were operating in that room, there was probably 15 or 16 of my members in that room. She
Mm,
said, I have to honestly say that just being in this room and watching how y'all operate has completely challenged my view of black men.
what?
Yeah, and it was interesting because from our perspective, we weren't. This is just how we were operating. We weren't putting on airs or
Right.
front or
Right.
anything like that. We were just being honest. This is our. We were very authentic, but what it was saying was it was going contrary to the perception that she has of black men.
Mm,
And I found that really interesting in the sense that, wow, what they see is what they'll be. And that doesn't necessarily mean in person. So if you're seeing the same type of crap on social media on
Yeah.
pitting black men against black women and so on and so forth
Yeah.
and all this crazy stuff, then sometimes, art does imitate life, right? And vice versa. And so
Yeah.
that was something that, to your point on us pondering on the perception. I
Right.
think that was definitely a huge takeaway for me.
Love that story. I think that's even more reason why these types of spaces are important. What we're
Yeah,
opening up, this dialogue, having these conversations, because it's imbued into our social media, right? So,
absolutely.
the fact is, social media, as we know, is here to stay, so to speak. And so, but if
Yeah,
there's a way to complement it or imbue it with the positivity that what you see, I love that you shared that. What you see is
yeah.
what you are. What? How did you say that again?
So yeah, what they see or what you see is what you'll be, right? So
Is what
what you
you'll
surround
be.
yourself with, your birds of a feather, that's truly reflection. It's so funny when you talk to someone and they got friends that are crazy air quotes. They're like, oh, but
Right.
that's not me. It's like, well, are you sure? Because those are the people you're associating with.
What did our parents say? Birds of a feather. Remember, our parents
Flock
used to say,
together.
"Flock
Birds of a
together."
feather flock together. Yes, ma'am. And it's so true. And I'm sounding like the 55-year-old men that I was talking about. I'm sounding kind of old, but it's true. The level of wisdom that you start getting
Yeah,
as you decide on who you're around, right? On who you decide to um, devote your time and effort to, and allow in your space. And I think that is something that is really key
yeah,
when we're raising these kids, right?
yeah.
When we're having them, instead of us dictating to them as to how they should operate, we should be doing a lot more modeling.
Huh.
And right, and kids watch what you do, not necessarily hear what you say. And so that is a true reflection of a lot of what we're seeing with the youth. They're
I
they're
think
seeing
that's a
what they're modeling.
wonderful. I think that's a wonderful segue into our next segment.